What a great time it has been to be in the studio having this conversation about the songs on my album, Another Universe. I am Vickie Maris, your host of this podcast. My co-hosts, Michael Kelsey and Scott Greeson, are here with me. We are going to give you some of the insights about the inspiration for the song South Bend, and a little bit about how it came together. Before we jump into that, though, I want to give you some extra backstory. And maybe this will provide some inspiration to you if you are a musician or a writer or any type of artist. Scott and I had already been playing South Bend out with the band, Scott Greeson and Trouble with Monday. We play at fairs and festivals and community events and corporate events. We had been playing it in the key that Scott and I had originally written it in. And as I was preparing to come into the studio to work with Michael for recording the scratch vocals, I decided, you know what, I don't think I want it in that key. I wanted to put it in a key that was a little bit better for my voice. So I changed the key. And when Michael arranged the song, so he played the instruments for the recorded version of South Bend, and he also helped me with adjusting the arrangement of the song. It was his encouragement that gave me the freedom to do the song a little bit differently than how we had already been playing it out. So if that hasn't occurred to you yet, I just want to throw that out there, that if you've already been playing a song for a while as a soloist or with your band, that it's okay for you to create something slightly different when you are recording it in the studio. So the version of South Bend that is on the album is slightly different than the version that our band came up with when we were bringing the song together with our 7-piece group last summer. And we're still using that version when we play it out. But when you hear it on the album, it's slightly different. In this episode of the show, we are going to have a conversation about South Bend. I am in the studio today with Michael Kelsey and Scott Greeson. I am Vickie Maris. Join us in just a moment for that banter about a place in Indiana called South Bend, which also happens to be the name of my song. It's Vickie again. I'm interrupting here to let you know about one of the songs that really got the ball rolling for me in terms of songwriting again and beginning to give some thought to the idea that I could come into the studio and record these songs for you. So here is my shout out to Joe Peters. Joe is a good friend of all of us, of Scott Greeson, of Michael Kelsey, of myself, and many of us who are active in the Songwriters group in this part of the state of Indiana in the U.S. It's called S.A.M.I, Songwriters Association of Mid-North Indiana. Joe spearheaded a project, a CD, called Collaboration. He and his co-writer had put together enough songs to make a 2-disc album. And they are in one location in the United States, and then they asked many of us who are vocalists, some of us are also singer-songwriters, they asked us if we would provide the vocal tracks for these various songs on this album. Many of the vocalists recorded their vocals at Rec Room Recording, which is in the basement of the Wells Community Center, which is the building that houses TAF, the Arts Federation. That's located in Lafayette, Indiana. This project was very collaborative in every direction. So we had vocal tracks that were recorded at Rec Room. Those files were sent to Michael Kelsey, and in his studio, he merged everything together with all the instrument tracks and mixed the songs there in his studio. And vocals for a few of the songs were recorded in Michael's studio. The song that Joe asked me to sing is called Nature's Acts of Wrath. That song came together towards the end of their project. It was Joe Peters and Frederick Michaels. It was written about the California wildfires that were going on in 2020. The song is a beautiful piece of poetry that Joe put to music. They sent it to Michael. Michael created the instrument bed, so he played all of the instruments for the song. And then I went to Michael's studio in the fall of 2020 and recorded the vocals for Nature's Acts of Wrath. I happened to have had my accordion with me that day. I had just gotten a new accordion. It was my first ever brand new accordion. I had always played used accordions that I have had refurbished. Well, I was so excited that I had my new accordion, a beautiful Petosa Little Pro XT. Took it with me. So we finished recording the vocals, and Michael said, "Hey, what about the accordion?" I really had just taken it because I wanted him to see the new instrument and to hear it. I wasn't thinking that we would put it on the song, but he had me play along with the song a couple times through and captured some of the accordion and built it into the song, Nature's Acts of Wrath. I'll link it in the show notes so that you can listen if you'd like to hear it. I just thought you might like to know about that. And Joe, if you're listening, this is my thank you to you for rekindling the spark in me about songwriting and recording. And a thank you to Michael for his work with me in the studio as we recorded Nature's Acts of Wrath. It was a really difficult song to sing as a vocalist, and Michael's coaching in that was very helpful to me. And also his encouragement. I had been a little mystified about how to approach the vocals on that song. And since it was about wildfires, I had gone out to a beautiful spot in nature along a creek with big trees towering overhead and just sat out there for quite a while, asking the trees if they would give me their input. And I happened to have shared that with Michael before we started to record. And we were, I don't know, maybe half a verse in on the first pass of the recording of the vocals. And Michael stopped things and got up and came over from the console and said, "I'm going to pull the scratch vocals out of your headphones. I don't want you to hear anything other than the instruments because I want you to be able to interpret very purely what the trees told you to say." And that opened a door for me on that song. So when you listen to that song, it's not on my album, it's on Joe's album, but when you listen to that song, you, I think, will hear my response to that request. So thank you, Michael, Joe, Frederick Michaels, for the opportunity to sing that song, Nature's Acts of Wrath. And I want to add a thank you to Scott Greeson, who is forever my encourager. He was definitely an encourager during the process of recording that song. He was the one that suggested, "Hey, just head on down to Michael's studio. He'll be able to work with you on the vocals. Hey, I know you're going to be able to figure out a way to make this song work vocally. Go for it." Thank you, Scott. And now let's get back to the conversation about South Bend, which is track 8 on my album, Another Universe. Welcome back. We are glad you are listening. We know that time is your most valuable asset, and the fact that you've chosen to be here listening to us have some conversation about a fun song called South Bend, that means a lot to us. My co-writer, Scott Greeson, is right across from me.
Yeah.
And the man who put all the instrumentation down on the song is also across from me, Michael Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, you guys.
Good evening, Miss Vickie.
Mm-hmm. South Bend came about a few years ago. So if you want a little background on the inspiration behind the song, I used to commute up to South Bend, Indiana, which is where the University of Notre Dame is located. And I was a staff member in executive education at Notre Dame for several years.
Go Irish.
Go Irish, yeah. It's a great place to work. I chose to commute there because I have a farm with Scott that's about 2.5 hours drive away from there. And I would go up there for the week and work and then drive back. And for some reason, I was always about in the same place of my commute when Scott would call to say, hey, how you doing? Where are you on your trip? And it didn't matter if I had left Thursday night, if I left Friday morning, if I left at noon on a Wednesday. It seemed like you always were calling about in the same place on the journey.
And to kind of put things in perspective, I mean, Vickie and I have literally known each other since birth, really. We were born in the same hospital, just a few days apart, and
but we didn't
know each other. We didn't, yeah. But you hung out at my crib, you know.
And we officially met a lot later.
Yeah, and we didn't meet again until many years later. But we've always had, since we have known each other in adulthood, we've always had this sense of presence with each other. Knowing what I know about us, it doesn't surprise me that I would just randomly call you almost the same place every time. But I can tell you.
And wait, it was always a little bit south of South Bend.
There you go. Yeah, and that's one of the hooks. We called it South Bend. Originally, the title was
South of South Bend.
South of South Bend.
Yeah, we shortened it.
But, you know, Vickie, on the surface, the song is about two people really missing each other and trying to figure out how to make it work when you have to be apart. But for me, it's really, not only is it a true life song, but it's also about how when you are apart, you really grow to appreciate how much you need and love and long for the presence of that person, and how the weekly reunions that we would have as friends. I mean, we're spouses, but first of all, we're best friends. So that song is about two good friends getting to reunite, but longing for each other during the week. And, you know, the journey of responsibility that you took on. And so the song has a lot more meaning to it than maybe just the surface or the lyrics might indicate for me on a personal level.
Yeah. I tried to write it in a way, I've done this with several of the songs, to make it so that people who are listening who don't know that backstory can relate to it. That I don't want to say make it generic, because South Bend isn't generic. It's pretty specific, but you know what I mean.
But insert the name of any city, really.
Right.
I mean, like, and what's beautiful about this, Vickie, I mean, in our marriage, we treat each other very much as equivalents in our careers. And, you know, you're definitely the consummate professional, and you lived in another city, and that role that you took on could be any city.
Yes.
You know, any professional female in today's society. And I'm at home. I wasn't raising our children, but, you know, we had a farm, and I was by no means a rancher, but you've taught me how to take care of things the best I can, so you would be comfortable in being away. It's a great story.
Yeah, that makes it a little different than what most people, I don't know, what a traditional marriage might be. I don't know if there is anything, if there is such a thing as a traditional marriage anymore, but just in the fact that I was the farm owner.
Yes.
You weren't the farm owner.
Right.
That makes it different.
Right.
And that I was driving, it was really hard for me. There was a number of mornings when I literally was weeping in the driveway
I would
as
say,
I was pulling away.
I would say more than not,
yeah.
Quite frankly, to have to leave the house. I don't think it was as much as she was missing me as she was going to miss all the animals and the horses and the llamas and everything we had.
And wondered how they were going to be when I got back.
Exactly. Rancher Scott in training was now Rancher Scott in reality. Holy moly.
Okay, let's get back to the song. South Bend is the first song that I wrote where I had the tool of a smartphone. And that has really changed my world as a songwriter. So, you know, while I'm commuting, I was so easily able to click the voice memo recorder and just record lyric ideas. And Scott, my co-writer on that song, you know, I would get home and go, okay, listen to what I've come up with so far. I want it to have this kind of drive, and I think I want to use these chords. And then he would get out his guitar and play what I was dictating to him. And I even have voice memos of me going, no, that is not what I want. So I was bossing you around.
What a
on
surprise.
That
Michael goes,
Married life.
South Bend was one of that group of 4 when I came for my first recording session. At that time, I was thinking it was going to be an EP. And I had 3 songs. I had Stars, On the Mountain, and South Bend. And I got to thinking, I got to write one more, at least one more if it's going to be an EP. So I wrote, if you've been listening to the podcast in sequence, you've heard us talk about Broken State. I wrote Broken State and brought that one for that recording session. And Michael and I had also worked a little bit on South Bend last summer, about a year ago from the recording, and we tried some different approaches to that song melodically, and I actually really like one of the other versions of it that we came up with. So maybe one of these days I'll get him talked into releasing that one as a second version of South Bend.
Yeah, it's funny how songs take on a different identity. Sometimes in kind of the day that you start working on something and playing it, it can take on an identity. And not that it's better or worse, it's just different. And then it illuminates a different part of the song or makes you feel a different way. And then some part of me, I kind of fall in love with that. And then you do it in a different way. And I go like, well, I'm falling in love with that. And you start to connect with all these different ways. But at the end of the day, if you're making a record, you got to kind of choose one. So I think we ended up grooving it around and then found what works in this context with everything else.
And this particular song, here's another point of encouragement I want to give to you if you are a songwriter and if you are working with other musicians, if you're in a band. This song was a lot of fun for me to bring to our band and to hear how they interpreted things. Scott and I play with usually 5 to 6 other people in our band, and they did some really cool things with it. But I was discovering as we were playing it out live that I had put the song in a key that wasn't really best for my voice. And Michael, you helped me with that. We put it in a different key and we changed a little bit of the song to make it more singable for me. So I just want to encourage you with that if you write something that ends up not feeling quite right as you're playing it out, don't hesitate to change it.
Yeah, sometimes when you play a song, even a drastic key change, it'll just make you'll realize that you're singing the melody, and then maybe if you made it a lot lower, you'll sing the same melody, and then you got plenty of headroom above, and you might find yourself launching off into some other melody, and then it sets the song off. And then so it's just fun to, every time I write a song, I have a lot of friends that when they write a song, they just go like, well, this is how it came out, this is how it is, which is cool. I'm cursed with, but what if I played it at this tempo? What if I played it in this key? What if I gave it a little swing? What if I did? What if I did it at halftime? And I like just exploring all these different avenues. And then all of a sudden you'll hit upon something and you're like, oh, it really comes to life in this particular way. So it's always fun just to experiment, and it gets you in touch with your song, trying to discover all these different angles into that song, and which just connects you with it. And then whatever you decide on, at least it's just really ingrained in you. It's part of you.
Michael has encouraged me with that, and as I've seen him do it, he'll take one of my new song ideas if I'm just playing something, we're not recording anything yet, and then he'll do that. You'll go, oh, let's try it this way, or let's play in that key, and they all end up sounding good.
There's like an aspect that kind of goes like, I didn't know it could be done like that. Really? Like a double time jig? Yeah. Wow, and there's something about that, like, I never knew South Bend could be in a jig. That's really interesting. And then bypass that and move on to the next day. But then once in a while you'll do something, you're like, ooh, that's the fit. That's the fit right there.
Yes.
This song actually was a learning experience for me. I've written a lot of songs. I spent a lot of time on lyrics, and I really enjoyed writing the song with Vickie. I remember finishing it up actually on one of the keys in Florida on just a getaway that we had taken just for a few days. But the one thing that stands out to me as a life lesson is, in my mind, after we've been playing it with the band for a while, I was thinking more like, this is the way it's got to be. This is the way it's going to be. And then Vickie presented me with an option that Michael had came up with on this. And it wasn't the option we ended up going with. But at the same time, it was eye-opening to remind me that the songs can have different life and different formats if you allow that to happen. And guess what? Sometimes you can be surprised. There's a surprise in that. And sometimes the surprise is better than the anticipated outcome the preconceived notion you've been carrying around. Mm-hmm. Even though you've been playing it out. I would normally always suggest to people It's always good to play your songs in front of people to get feedback, how they react, before you would make it final. In the old days, you would say it's not final till it's vinyl. Same principle. In this case, it was really interesting. We'd been playing it out, and you guys found some sweet spot that was a bit different than what we've been playing out for the recording, but not quite as different as the version that you guys had presented to me. And I look back on that version that you initially presented to me, and I was like, it was so different. Initially, I was like, that's really interesting. But we've been playing it this way for so long. And I was maybe resistant to that. And I kind of regret that. So this one single song has really opened my eyes to the fact that I really need to have my eyes opened for a while on these tunes for the potentiality of what they might be, not what I think they are.
And Michael, you use a phrase something like "let the song dictate it," or what do you say? There's something like that.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we'll let the song tell you what it needs. Like.
Yeah.
I've been working with Michael in the past, and we've known each other for a long time. I remember redoing one of my songs on one of my albums from an earlier version, and it took on another life of its own. It's the same song with some minor modifications, but yet it took another path. But this song was a great reminder. I love the way that what we settled on was just incredibly awesome. I love the song. People, not only from Indiana, can resonate with it, but the message behind it is a universal message. Mm-hmm. It is.
It's been fun to bring that one to life and to not only share it with my friends that I have from the South Bend community, but it's been fun to play it out for audiences in other locations and see people smile and enjoy it.
They like it. They really do. So it's fun.
Yeah. Thank you for hanging out with us for this episode of the podcast. Come back. We have another song to talk about. As you know from being a part of this episode, this one was about South Bend, track 8 on the album. I invite you to go listen to any of the other episodes about the other songs. There are 11 tracks in total on this album, and they are all out there and available for you to listen to in whichever podcast directory is your preferred way to listen to podcasts. And the songs are also out there in all the major streaming services. We'll see you again in another episode of Making of the Album, Another Universe.